People might be familiar with Aristotle's theory of stasis and the reason why revolutions happen, and we're living in revolutionary times, places like the Middle East, Crimea, other places. The reason revolutions happen, according to Aristotle, is that philia breaks down, love breaks down in a society, and people lose the compassion for the other. And this is one of the reasons why Philadelphia, which was the original capital of the United States, is the city of philia. It's the city of brotherly love. And so to reintroduce that into politics, I think is really important. It's not spoken enough. I want to, a little caveat, this, if anybody's on Prozac, they might feel better leaving. I don't want to depress anybody, but I want to, before you can really talk about healing, you have to look at the diagnostics to understand what's going on. A very influential author for me is Arnold Toynbee, and he wrote a book over 50 years ago called Change and Habit, The Challenge of Our Time. And in that book, he argues, and he's worth listening to because in 1947 he wrote an essay about a civilization when it's up against the wall against another civilization has certain strategies, and one of them is zealotry and fanaticism. And he warns about the Muslim world and actually identifies 3 places where he felt, in 1947, that he felt serious problems would emerge in the future: Afghanistan, Yemen, and Saudi Arabia. And that was in 1947. One of the gifts that historians bring is that they look at the future with hindsight. Because they know the past so well, they can see and prognosticate about what's going to happen. But he wrote this book, Change and Habit, arguing that as humans we have certain habits that are very dangerous. And they're not instinctual, they're literally habitual. And the worst he felt was the habit of going to war. That it's a choice, that there are other alternatives, and peoples have done other things. War is not the only solution, it's actually always a failure. It's the last refuge of the incompetents. Violence. So, but he also felt there were other aspects. One of them was tribalism or nationalism, and this idea of not seeing us as a human family, as seeing us as us and them. And this is a very dangerous habit of the mind. And if we're not trained to change these habits, and this is why virtue theory is based on altering habits, it's adopting new habits, and the human being can change. So, and it's not nature versus nurture. The two work together. So this idea of nature versus nurture is something also that's problematic. So I just want to say that I'm going to talk about another one of my favorite people is Søren Kierkegaard, who was another visionary, somebody who really saw the future. If you haven't read Kierkegaard, he's an incredibly humorous writer. Wonderful wit. He says that he said things to make people laugh while he was crying inwardly. But one of the things that he said was that one solitary person cannot help or save an age. He can only make it clear that it is on its way to a downfall. And this is the Cassandra problem. Because if people know Greek mythology, Cassandra warned, not in the Iliad, but in a play, warned the Trojans not to bring in the horse. But she had the gift of prophecy, but she was cursed with that nobody would believe her. So the purpose of human existence, I'm going to speak from my tradition. This is the Festival of Face. So I'm going to speak from my tradition, but I think this could be shared by many peoples. There's a verse in the Quran that tells us that one of the reasons why we were created was for the cultivation of the earth. That the verse says that it was God who brought you into the being from the earth and settled you therein to cultivate it, استعمركم فيها. So imara is cultivation, and it indicates a lot of different things that humans do. And this is why anybody who's involved in cultivation of the earth in a positive way is fulfilling a divine purpose, whether they believe in the divine or not. That they are fulfilling a divine purpose. And this is often lost on religious peoples that are working from a provincial tradition and not recognizing that everybody is here for a reason. The second is the purpose is actually to worship, to adore the Creator. And this is obviously from the Abrahamic traditions, that I only created unseen beings and human beings to worship me. And then finally, stewardship. The idea of being caretakers of what we've been given. This is called the Khalifa. And the Khalifa is one who stands in place. And the Quran tells us that God said, I'm placing in the earth a steward. And a steward is one who acts on the behalf of another. And so this is divine stewardship. And then David, we're told in the Jewish tradition, that David, we have made you a steward over the land. Judge fairly between people. Do not follow your desires. This is a really important point about this, because stewardship is corrupted by following desires. And lest they divert you from this divine plan. And so the question is, how are we doing as stewards of the earth? If this is really one of the reasons why we're here. So just to look maybe at some of the signs. I trained in the medical profession, and we always take vital signs, and we also assess orientation. So you ask somebody what, I was working at the time when we didn't have a president. There was that little interregnum period where we didn't know who was president. Was it Bush or Kerry? So we couldn't really ask them who's president. But you ask a patient who's president, you ask them, where are you? Who are you? So you orient them to time and place, so you can see, do they know? One of the verses in the Quran says that corruption, and the word is fasad, has appeared on land and on sea because of what people have earned by their acts, to make them taste some of what they have done, that they might turn back. So the idea of when we do things in the world that are dangerous and negative, then we get this repercussion. And the reason for that repercussion, it's actually a mercy, because it's letting you know that you need to turn back, that you're doing something wrong. And so you cannot go out and sow corruption without having the corruption come back at you in what, in economic terms, is these externalities. For people that know that term, these are the negative consequences of economic production. So if you have a factory, the factory doesn't intend to pollute the river, because it just wants to produce whatever it's producing, but that's a negative externality. You also have positive externalities. So one of the signs of the latter times, when it's gotten too much, the Quran says that men will cry out and say, what is happening to the earth? On that day, it will tell you all, because your Lord inspired it to do so. So the word in Arabic that's used in the Quran, which is fasad, is rottenness, spoiledness, corruption, decay, decomposition, putrefaction, depravity, wickedness. So it's used for, like when food goes bad, the Arabs say fasada, it's gone bad. But they also use it for a person when they've gone bad. So something has gone wrong. And pollution is the undesirable state of the natural environment being contaminated with harmful substances as a consequence of human activities. So the state of being polluted. It's also defilement. And this is also traditionally a religious term that was used. Now, the traditional interpretation, which is from the 7th century of one of the great Quran interpreters, Abdullah ibn Abbas, about this, he said the signs of corruption, of fasad, on land are fires, soil degradation, the lowering of the water tables, and among the signs of corruption in the sea is the diminution of the fish. So the fish begin to disappear. So this is 7th century. And you will actually find in Chinese manuscripts from over 2,000 years ago, the problems of pollution. These aren't new problems, and societies have had negative effects on the lands that they were in. But in my own, I'm coming from the West Coast, one of the things that we've seen is a lot of fires, and I don't know if people know about the fires that are happening all over the planet. Spain, Europe has a tremendous problem with fires. But we see a lot of fires, and you can see the increase that's happened over time here, just from 1980 to 1989 to 2000, 2010, and we lose firefighters, people go in. One of the reasons is because of the climate change that's happening, so it's increasing this risk. And then wildfires are projected to burn more land as temperatures continue to rise. So you can see the projected increase here on the west coast of, on the west side of our country. Another aspect is the air pollution, and it's extraordinary how many people suffer around the globe from air pollution. Mexico City has a huge problem with asthma. We have actually high mortality rates in major cities because of the pollution. We're actually finding also a lot of contamination in our bodies. So this is a major problem. This is China, where a lot of people are forced to wear masks because the pollution gets so bad. And then another aspect here is soil degradation, which a lot of people are unaware of this. I think people here, I mean, I'm obviously speaking to a lot of people that are aware of these things, but a lot of people are not aware of the real crises that we're seeing in soil degradation. Soil is a very thin layer. It takes millennia to produce topsoil, and it can be lost very easily. And I mean, obviously, we have hydroponics, we have other ways of growing plants. Plants actually don't need soil to grow, and hydroponics, they began studying hydroponics in the 17th century, but it would be an immense loss to our species because we have incredible problems with water as well. And this is another aspect of the desertification, which I saw firsthand in the Sahara. I lived in the Sahara Desert, and I saw firsthand literally the encroachment of the Sahara Desert. It's pretty overwhelming to see it, to see whole cities engulfed in sand. So overall, this is what we're seeing, and this is what our scientists are telling us. We don't need apocalyptic prophets now to talk about these things. We have our scientists telling these, and it's an important reminder that the earth is not just for human beings. One of the verses in the Quran is that it's God who spread out the earth for all living creatures. It literally says lil anam, and the anam it literally means all those that sleep. So it's all sleeping creatures. It's a place where you should feel safe and secure. It's a place of repose. You can't sleep unless you feel safe or secure. And many of the animals are suffering. And I've mentioned this before, but one of the intriguing things to me about endangered species is it's not the cockroaches that are going extinct. It's not the rats or the mice. They're actually thriving. But what's going extinct are these animals that historically, in many traditional cultures, they use them as names for their children. They're the animals that embody noble spirits, the eagles, the lions, the tigers, the wolves. One of the real tragic aspects, I don't know, people might know about the doctrine of signatures, but there's a traditional belief in medicine that things that look like things are good for them. For instance, in the Arab tradition, cashews are very good for memory, according to the Arabs. If you look at a cashew, it looks almost like a hypothalamus, which is where memory is located in the brain. So if something looks like something, if you cut a carrot, you can see an eye in the carrot. So carrots are considered good for eyes. Well, there's an Asian belief that the rhinoceros, you can use your imagination, is good for people that are would otherwise use Viagra. And so, unfortunately, the rhinoceros, an extraordinary animal, is literally being wiped out because of this desire for people to use this aphrodisiac. Virginia Gray Henry published a wonderful book, which was written in the 10th century, about the animals having a lawsuit against humanity. So they actually come to court and demand that the human be taken to task for wreaking so much havoc in the natural world. It's worth reading. But then we move from the land to the sea. And I could talk, there's a lot of other things happening, and many of you are aware of that. You know about the mountaintops in Kentucky and many, many other things. But I don't want to, I just want to give an overview here. But the oceans also, amazing what we're seeing in the oceans. The Gulf of Mexico, the repercussions of that are just overwhelming. And the people that are suffering to this day, there's a lot of immune diseases that have occurred. A lot of people really suffering, and the BP cleanup is far from over. I mean, the effects of that are massive on the planet. So oil is another major problem. And then this is obviously, again, the animals just really suffer when it comes to this. So, and then burning off a lot of the oil, which is also another real source of pollution. It's interesting that right now, this literally is May 13th, that a glacial region's melt is past the point of no return, according to NASA. So these things are happening like right now, and our scientists are confirming these things, and it's overwhelming for people. It's very difficult to process these things. When I first read that 90% of the fish were gone, I thought that was it just seemed so crazy. And I sat next to a man on an airplane who happened to be a marine biologist, and we started talking. I asked him about that. I said, listen, I read this in The Guardian. Is this true? He said, well, it's between 85 and 95%. So we kind of took a middle number in there. And I said, well, what do you think about that? He said, keeps me up at night. One of the things, and this is really important about the acidification, so I want you to just see, the ocean acidification, which is a result of the pollution. We have acid rain. Our oceans are becoming more and more acidic, which is very interesting, and I'm going to get to that why. We'll get back to the jellyfish, which are very interesting, but here's just some numbers. People don't know, but a bluefish tuna, when it's fully formed, is worth literally tens of thousands of dollars on the sushi market. And so these fishermen go out looking for, they don't find them anymore, these giant ones, because the overfishing is so immense that they're not allowing the fish to actually reach their full maturity. So what's happening, what's interesting is that it's creating an ideal environment for jellyfish. They're the only ones that are thriving right now in the ocean. The big fish stocks fall 90% since 1950, according to the National Geographic. So, the jellyfish are thriving, which is really fascinating. I read this book, Stung, and it was a really devastating book written by, she's the foremost expert on jellyfish. And jellyfish are fascinating. They're toxic. What I find interesting is the ocean in traditional cosmology is consciousness, which is why Robert Frost has a wonderful poem about why we look out at the ocean. The land varies more, but we still want to look out at the ocean. And we can't look out far and we can't look in deep, but that doesn't prevent us from looking at the ocean. The ocean is, in cosmology, it's consciousness. And the fact that all these great fish are dying off, the whales and the dolphins, but the jellyfish, this spineless, brainless predator, all it does is consume. It's just a spineless, brainless consumer. And that to me is just such an amazing statement about human consciousness. And are the jellyfish taking over our minds, our consciousness? Are we becoming human jellyfish? And believe it or not, all over they're having jellyfish warnings because they're really thriving. And the woman who wrote that book, Stung, says it's way past. This was a wake-up call a long time ago, and they literally have shut down aircraft carriers because there's so many jellyfish pods out there. So now, what are the roots of this crisis? At the heart of it is the modern doctrine of the consumer. Now, what's interesting to me is that the consumer in Old English meant the devil. He was called the consumer because he consumed the souls of people. And consumption was a name for the wasting disease in the 19th century. It's what killed people slowly.